Good morning. I have great news. So we've been very blessed that we have two new elders here over the Main Street congregation. We're very blessed with that. And we also, guest told me to announce that we have a new deacon, Brother Steve Hammond over here. So everyone be sure to give him your words of encouragement, your prayers, and blessings upon him. And be sure, it's not... Being a deacon, being an elder, those aren't easy work. So be sure that with our speech and with our hearts and attitudes that we're lifting them up sincerely and in love. Well, this morning we're going to talk about something, one of my favorite chapters in Proverbs, which is Proverbs 8. But we're going to talk about more than that. But I'm going to ask you the question, have you ever had two women fight over you? Have you ever had two women fight over you? That may be an odd question. I see some of y'all thinking. Don't answer. Don't answer out loud, especially if your spouse is sitting next to you. But we're going to think about that idea because there's a picture being painted throughout Proverbs of this idea of two women competing for you, the listener, for you, the reader. So we're going to learn about Lady Wisdom. So before we do that, what's up with wisdom? And if you listened to me maybe a couple years ago, sometimes I wish I could go back to my past self when I go back to listen to sermons, and I wish I could just smack myself or put duct tape over my mouth and no, I regret that. No, that wasn't accurate. That wasn't right. But this is one of those things that I've really failed to present accurately in the past. So I'm trying to remedy that this morning, which is if you would have asked me before, what is wisdom? I would have said, well, difference between knowledge and wisdom, I'd say, knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put tomatoes in a fruit salad, right? So that's what I used to say. That's not at all what the biblical authors had in mind or pictured when they're talking about wisdom. So I hope to more accurately reflect that this morning. So, as always, wisdom is in Hebrew, chokmah. Chokmah. It's very difficult to do that little clear throat, right? But it comes from two words, which is chok, which is potential. I butchered that one. Chok, which means potential, and then ma, which means what is. So thus, wisdom is the idea of seeing what is potential, or what can potentially be out of something that's not. So you look out, you see something chaotic, and then with chokmah, you can see and you can start to transform that into a reality. In fact, this word is used about the temple artisans, or tabernacle artisans, when God fills his spirit into these men that are supposed to do a lot of carving, a lot of woodwork, because they're taking this raw material, right? And with chokhmah, they're seeing that, and they're cultivating it into this structure, into patterns, into beauty. So that's this idea of wisdom in the Hebrew Scriptures. So it's like you look out at a desolate or abandoned city, and then what you do is with chokmah, you see the potential in that chaos, and you produce it into a thriving society. It can be used in that way as well. And the psalmist used this about God in creation. He writes, "O Lord, how manifold are your works, in wisdom, in chokmah have you made them all. The earth is full of your creatures." And we know that this comes from the idea of the Genesis account, right? There's this chaotic waters, right? God sees that, his spirit is hovering over, and then he structures that into a habitable land that produces life with birds and fish and humankind, and it's beautiful, it's amazing. And God did that out of this chaotic nature, structured this life-giving realm. So wisdom was so important to God's covenant people that there are 3 whole books dedicated to this idea of wisdom, or wisdom literature in the Scriptures. And those books are Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Now, what's funny is these are a collection of wisdom literature, and you're not really supposed to pull them all apart. You kind of take the whole of it together. And here's what I mean by that. If you read Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, you'll walk away with very different questions because they seem so kind of against each other or offer very different perspectives. I'll show you what I mean. Ecclesiastes 2:15. It says, "Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will also happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity." So he's saying, I've lived wisely my whole life, but then I'm going to die. Just like the fool who's lived foolishly, he's going to die. So what's the benefit, right? Vanity of vanities. It's all vanity. And then Job comes along, and one of Job's friends, remember Job, is he a bad guy or a good guy? he's a really good guy, right? God's bragging about him, right? In the council, he's bragging about his servant Job. And so, do good things or bad things happen to Job? Well, that's kind of where the story picks up. Very, very awful things. The worst things you can imagine happen to Job. And his friends come to comfort him, and they're awful comforters. They're miserable comforters. In fact, one of Job's friends says this, "Remember, who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off?" He's saying, I've never seen bad things happen to good people. It just doesn't happen, Job. And remember what God says near the end? He rebukes Job's friends and he says, "For you have not spoken to me what is right, as my servant Job has." So Job comes along and kind of offers, well, you can be good and live wisely and still suffer hardship. And there's not really a clear answer as to why. You just don't know. You trust in God. That's the solution. And then Proverbs comes along with this kind of hopeful expectation of saying, "For by me, wisdom, your days will be multiplied and years will be added to your life." Well, according to in Ecclesiastes, it says what? That the swift don't always win the race, right? Time and chance happens to all. Things don't always operate like they should. But then Proverbs comes along and is like, no, if you live wisely, you'll multiply years to your life. It will serve you well. So there's all these different perspectives about wisdom and its role. So these books were preserved, as I said, in a collection purposefully. There's so many questions and realities that we'd like to think we could understand if it was just clearly revealed. You couldn't. We can't understand God's ways, so he communicates them in a way that we can think about them, meditate them, learn them. When considering this, we have to consider the whole counsel of wisdom literature. So, does wisdom add years to your life? Yeah, it does. Does it always happen that way? No. Well, why does that happen? We don't always know. But we trust in God because we know he has wisdom and we trust in his wisdom. So you see, so it's this culmination of this harmony of all these different perspectives of wisdom. And another fascinating thing is the biblical wisdom literature is, for the vast majority of it, is written down in the style of poetry. Now, it's not the kind of poetry that we're used to today. It wasn't so much about rhyme. It was about parallelism or ideas and themes that were written with Hebrew poetry, and it's really cool to read. There's a lot of detailed books about this kind of thing. If you'd really like to know, I can shoot you some links. But we may ask, why poetry, right? Why poetry? Well, if we got any Wordsworth fans in here, here's one of his most famous one from "I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud." He says, "I wandered lonely as a cloud." Is he describing himself? Is he saying that I am a cloud floating in the sky right now? No, but you see this mental picture of this stray cloud. You ever see that? Just a stray cloud just kind of wandering by itself, kind of like on a dark day. It's just moving. It looks so alone in this big expanse of the sky. And he's describing that's what my heart feels like. That floats on high o'er vales and hills when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Okay, are these daffodils, can plants dance? Do plants are like, oh, I'm going to do a little jig right now? No, but he's describing that these flowers that are moving, right, with the wind, it's like he's starting to see this beauty of how it's like this symmetry. It's purposeful, it's designed, it's intentional, and it's as if that it's aware of its beauty and it wants to dance, nature itself. And that's poetry, right? That's not kind of word for word, literally. That's not what he's saying. He could write, "I feel bad today, but I saw a beautiful garden." Right? There's not as much depth to that. There's not really much to walk away and kind of consider. Whereas when it's written in poetry, it gives you more to unpack, and it helps you unpack more abstract ideas or high concept ideas. It's just tools. And if you look at this, we can see this all throughout Scripture. Poetry's all over the Scripture. Exodus 15:7, this is the song of Moses. Remember when God delivers them and drowns Pharaoh's servants in the Red Sea? It says, "In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrow your adversaries, you send out your fury, it consumes them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, the floods stood up in a heap, the deeps congealed in the heart of the sea." Did the people of Israel witness a ginormous nose of God's that appeared there over the water? Did they see that? No. But Moses is envisioning the reality of God's deliverance by poetically assigning God an anatomy that is so powerful and so huge that just the breath, is commanding the seas and rising them up and storing them in places. You see, just something as insignificant as is commanding a powerful force of nature. So it's describing this reality of what happened in a very beautiful sense for you to unpack, for you to think about. And the biblical authors are no strangers to poetry. And even Paul writes little poems throughout his epistles that are really cool. So this medium of poetry helps us see the reality of wisdom and how we as God's covenant people can find it. And that's kind of unlocked in the idea of that the poetry presents to us. So Proverbs 1 through 10, we're not going to read all of it. Proverbs chapters 1 through 10 records a series of speeches from a wise father to his son, to this kingly father. He's instructing his son in how he should lead, how he should rule, how he should conduct his life. And he has 8 speeches within that. Well, there's about 10 speeches, but 8 speeches of those 10 involve 2 characters. And that's Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. And we're going to examine that. So Proverbs 4:5, I want you to notice the poetic language that's used here. Verse 5, get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her. Who's her? I didn't see it. Who's her? Well, this is saying wisdom. It's describing wisdom. It's a personification of wisdom as a her. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. This is like an intimate relationship, isn't it? That you don't forsake this woman. Do not forsake Lady Wisdom, because she will keep you. If you love her, she will guard you. Notice what the poetry is communicating to us. This discernment of creating order out of chaos is personified as a woman. And a woman who should be loved and listened to and heeded. I kind of think, I had 3 really awesome professors in college that were just really good, and 2 of them were women. So I think women are better at teaching sometimes, especially at least in my college experience. That was the case. And so it's kind of like this lady teacher that's very, that's kind but firm, that gives you the good advice that you need, right? Instructs you, guides you. Proverbs 2:16 says, so you will be delivered from the forbidden woman. You see, we have Lady Wisdom, and then we have this forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth. Notice he told the son not to forsake Lady Wisdom. And then this forbidden woman, she forsakes the one from her youth, and forgets the covenant of her God. She's faithless, right? Lady Wisdom is faithful. This forbidden woman is faithless. And this is used in the imagery of an adulteress. And there's this idea of duality. Like, yes, he's warning his son against sexual temptation, but it's more than that. He's personifying folly itself as this seductress, as this forbidden woman. And so notice, again, the repeated forsaken language. Lady Wisdom should not be forsaken by you, the reader, and she protects you from the seduction of this other woman who is the opposite of Lady Wisdom, the woman who forsakes her covenants. And notice the chaotic state, right? Because Hokmah, this Lady Wisdom, she helps structure out of chaos, creating order and life. But notice this forbidden woman. For her house sinks down to death. Sinks down. What is that? Like dilapidation. You ever see a house just kind of start to crumble because it hasn't been lived in, it hasn't been maintained or anything? It's just collapsing in on itself. This forbidden woman, her house is collapsing, and her path leads to the departed. None who go to her can come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. You see, there's 2 paths. One that looks nice, right? That's seductive, that says nice things, but leads to destruction and death and chaos. And then Lady Wisdom, who's very structured, will, say something that might hurt your feelings a little bit, but you know that it's there to guide you and to bring you to life, to structure your life. Keep your way far from her, Proverbs 5:8, and do not go near the door of her house. Do you see the personification language? Like, these are very real forces. The forbidden woman is the antagonist to Lady Wisdom. And notice what the man who listens to the seductive woman says when he is destroyed, after he follows her. Look at this. And at the end of your life you groan when your flesh and body are consumed, and you say, how I hated discipline, and my heart despised reproof. And so obviously this isn't talking about just a physical adulteress. There's a lot more going on here. That at the end of your life, it's destroyed you because you've followed, you've sought after Lady Folly. You've fallen for the trap. To forsake Lady Wisdom is to go with the forbidden woman. And this is all brought to the forefront in chapters 7 through 9. And I never quite caught this before, so this is interesting. Proverbs 7:4, the king tells his son, "Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call insight, your intimate friend, to keep you from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. And I have seen among the simple," Proverbs 7:7, "I have perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense, passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house." So he's kind of accidentally wandering around where she lives, right? He's purposely, flirting with danger. "And behold, the woman meets him, dressed as a prostitute, wily of heart. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home." Notice how Lady Folly is dressed, right? She's dressed seductively. She's out to seduce this man. But what are her mannerisms? Did you catch that? She's loud and wayward. She's very bold, right? She has no shame about it whatsoever. Verse 18, "Come," she tells this poor, naive fool, "let us take our fill of love till morning. Let us delight ourselves with love, for my husband is not at home." Do you notice that forsaking the companion of her youth with that Lady Folly there going on? He has gone on a long journey. This is that one who forsakes. This is that chaotic. Do you see all the chaos that she's starting to stir? But, it sounds so good. It looks so good. It seems like it's going to be good for me, but the end is destruction. He says, "Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many a victim has she laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death." That's a reversal of the structured created order that God made out of the chaos. It's like reverting back. That's what she's trying to do. She's just bringing this chaos back into this created space. And so you can do that to your own life. There's competing voices, the forbidden woman and Lady Wisdom, who are fighting over you. You have two women fighting for you, right? They both want you to listen to them. Lady Folly is attractive, seductive, flattering, forward, bold, and loud. Her path, however, is ugly, leading only to disorder, suffering, and death. In contrast, the wise father tells his son about fair Lady Wisdom. Proverbs 8 and verse 1. Notice this. "Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice?" All right, so Lady Folly, she's loud, but is Lady Wisdom loud as well? Yeah, she's raising her voice. She's yelling too. Verse 14. "I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles, all who govern justly." This is Chokhmah personified as a woman who's pleading with the children of man to listen to her. And when you see humans, and look at the description, when is Chokhmah used? It's when you have just leaders, right, who are signing good policy. It's very rare nowadays, but when we see a politician actually living what they say, writing bills that truly helps their community, that's Chokhmah, right? They're structuring, they're creating order, they're creating blessing for their people by their decisions when it's according to Chokhmah, right? When it's according to justice, when they're following God. Proverbs 8:22, notice this. "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water." So notice what this poem is saying. The same system that God used to order and structure life out of chaos is the same order and creative force that is offered to you and I. Pretty cool. The same thing that God used to look out on a chaotic universe and create everything we see and everything we experience is what's offered to us. Is crying out for our attention. There's something beautiful here. It's so beautiful when you actually view wisdom as not just this impersonal idea. And that's why poetry helps us kind of make this concrete in our minds. If it would be more helpful for us if we thought of wisdom as a real spiritual force, right? As a real, personification is there for a reason. And so there's this idea of this personhood to wisdom, and it helps us kind of bring it back down to our level, kind of help us conceptualize this a bit more. Proverbs 8:30, then I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man. You see this? That wisdom was enjoyed. It's almost like the idea of she grew up before God like a little girl, right? And then grows up and then goes into the inhabited world that he created. And to you and I, to have this relationship, to view God and how to view the world is through Hokmah, right? That's structuring that creative life. But again, there's competition for that. Proverbs 9:1, wisdom has built her house. Again, Lady Wisdom, she built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here, she cries. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight. So she's offering good things there, right? Bread, wine, life, like, Father, I have all these things. I have this abundant life to give to you. But then there's another woman. The woman Folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. Whoever is simple. Notice how she's mirrored, like she's an evil mirror to Lady Wisdom. Listen, whoever is simple, which is what Lady Wisdom just said, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. So notice that verse 17 there, that's an anti-proverb. That's an evil proverb, right? Because after chapter 10, you'll start seeing those couplets, the da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, right? Or like reprove, fool in his folly, and it's not going to do you any good, right? That's one of the proverbs. But then this one is, hey, it's good to do bad things. Stolen water is sweet. Bread eaten in secret is pleasant. She's evil, right? She's totally evil. She's the antithesis. But how do we get Lady Wisdom? How do I reject Lady Folly and accept Lady Wisdom? And this is the one thing that Job, Ecclesiastes, and Proverbs agrees on over and over throughout the books. Proverbs 1:7 says this, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Job 28:28. Job says, and he said to man, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And to turn away from evil is understanding. Ecclesiastes 12:13, it says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And this fear is a humble reverence for who God is. And you think about what Job described, that if he were to withdraw his ruach, his breath, all the earth would perish, because he sustains all things. Why the earth is still turning, why there's gravity, why there's creatures, why I can think, why I look out in the sky. God created and designed all of those things. That should strike a humble, reverent fear in my heart. Realizing how powerful God is. It's just like, this may be a bad example, but why are we very cautious around guns? Because they're powerful, right? They're very powerful things. So we're very careful with them. And there's a healthy fear that you need to have of guns. Well, how much more powerful is God than a gun? So we're dealing with a very powerful, all-powerful, perfect being. That should put fear into our hearts, but not a paranoia. Rather, a understanding of who God is, and that will make us listen to what he says. In order to hear what he says, we have to understand who he is. And that's what Lady Wisdom helps us with, is how do you get Lady Wisdom? Step 1, fear God. Fear God and keep his commandments. But why be wise now? Because Proverbs was written to king's sons, right? It's wisdom for king's sons. And I don't plan on running for office, and I never want to write policy, right? I don't want to do those things. What's the benefit of wisdom to us today? Why shouldn't we just kind of watch our TV, scroll through Facebook, read our Bible every now and again? Why pursue wisdom as if she's a real woman that's calling to us, that God ordained to call to us, to draw us into her paths? Why should we do that? Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 6, because the Corinthian church, they got a lot of issues, and one of their issues was they were squabbling with each other. They were having these rivalries or these kind of like court cases, right? So they get, hey, you wronged me. It's like if Doug scratched my car out in the parking lot, and it's a 2005 wrecked Toyota Corolla, so this wouldn't happen. But if he scratched my car, honestly, I wouldn't notice. But let's say it was very nice. Let's say it was a Lambo, and then Doug scratched it. And then I say, you owe me money. And then you say, no, I'm not. I'm not giving you money. And then you and I can't reach an agreement. So then we were going to Gentile Roman courts, or, to Roman courts to get justice. And here we are, members of the same body of Christ. And then going before unbelievers. And Paul's like, no, this has to stop, guys. Listen, no. I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you, what? Wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers. Wisdom still plays an integral role in the church today. And we as Christ's imagers, if God used wisdom to create the universe, we definitely should be using wisdom in our lives and how we deal with one another and resolving conflict. We need to have wisdom. We have to have wisdom. He writes in verse 1, I'm working my way backwards here. Notice this. Why have wisdom? When one of you has a grievance against another, does he dare go to law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more then matters pertaining to this life? Essentially what Paul's saying is, yes, you need to have wisdom in order to establish in how to deal with these conflicts, right? But also, you need the practice for the reality of the next world, of the world that's coming. Because I don't know what this means. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what this means, but this is rulership. This is authority language. This is God looking out on us as members of his son's body and saying, you will reign with me. The seat of judgment I take, you will also. I extend my rule to you as well. We're king's sons. Just like Proverbs is a king speaking to his son who will one day reign. And he's talking to us. You will share in this glory. You're going to share in this rulership. You're going to share in this judgment. So get used to it. Start practicing it. And so every day is preparing us for the world to come that Jesus told us over and over about. If you are a Christian, you are a son or daughter of the King. And he is sharing his reign with us. Therefore, it's necessary for us to become wise, to prepare for our role in the renewed creation. The takeaway is there are competing voices for the decisions you make in your life. Do we understand that? There's two women fighting over you, right? Lady Folly attempts to seduce us into sin that leads to chaos and death. And Lady Wisdom is also crying out to you to find her that you may know God and create order into chaotic spaces as an imager of Christ. That's what we're called out to do. We go out into this world of darkness and we be lights. We bring Christ's love. We bring his truth. We bring his words. We bring his example. We bring his healing to all those around us in the church and outside the church in order to be like Christ, to be the image of Christ, to behave with chokmah, right? That we're structuring order into our lives. And so this is important. And we all know when we've made bad decisions, we've all given in to Lady Folly, right? We've all listened to that voice, that temptation to sin. It looks so alluring, right? It's appealing. It's attractive to us. Her words sound good, right? But the end is death. And we've seen that. It happens in our lives that when we make that bad decisions, our relationships suffer, our own health suffers, our mental health suffers when we keep deciding to go down bad paths or make these foolish decisions. There's a path. There's a path that Lady Wisdom is calling us to, and obviously God is the one who's calling us through wisdom. So if you would like to accept that wisdom, fear God. Obey his commandments, decide to become a child of his. And if you want to know how to do that, if you'd like to be baptized, if you'd like to confess your faith, we ask that you please come forward as we stand and sing.